Have you ever felt utterly small and overwhelmed by a massive challenge? Have you ever sensed that the entire world was against you, even when you knew deep down you were standing on the right side of truth? If so, you share more in common with one of history's greatest kings than you might realize. Prepare yourself to embark on the incredible journey of David, a humble shepherd boy who rose to become the most beloved king of Israel. A man known as one after God's own heart. But don't let the admiration fool you. David was far from perfect. His story is a vivid tapestry woven with soaring victories and heart-wrenching failures. It's precisely this blend of triumph and trial that makes his story so compelling and so deeply relevant to us today. Let's start from the very beginning. The unexpected ascent of a young shepherd to the royal court. Our tale unfolds in Bethlehem, a modest town nestled on the outskirts of Jerusalem. Here, we encounter Jesse, a simple man whose family line was destined to shift the course of Israel's history. In 1 Samuel 16:1, the Lord sends the prophet Samuel to Bethlehem, to Jesse's house, with a secret mission of enormous importance to anoint the new king of Israel. Jesse had 8 sons, and David, the youngest, appeared the least remarkable. While his older brothers stood tall and impressive, David spent his days away from the spotlight, tending his father's sheep out in the fields. This seemingly humble occupation was quietly shaping the character of the future king. It was in those wide-open spaces that David learned lessons no royal palace could ever teach. Courage in defending the flock against predators, compassion in caring for the weaker sheep, and leadership when guiding the flock to lush pastures and tranquil waters. Without realizing it, David was being prepared to lead an entire nation. When Samuel arrived at Jesse's house, he was presented with Jesse's older sons one by one, but none was the chosen one. Confused, Samuel inquired if Jesse had any more sons. "They're still the youngest," Jesse replied, "but he is tending the sheep." When David was finally brought in, Samuel's heart leapt. There stood a young man with a ruddy complexion, bright eyes, and a handsome appearance. But more importantly, David bore something far deeper: the divine favor. The Lord said to Samuel, "Rise and anoint him, for this is the one." Then came the pivotal moment recorded in 1 Samuel 16:13. Samuel took the horn full of oil and anointed David in the presence of his brothers. At that instant, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. Picture the scene: a shepherd boy, likely overwhelmed by surprise and uncertainty, now anointed to become Israel's future king. His brothers, who had always regarded him as the youngest and least significant, suddenly faced the reality that David's path had changed dramatically. Yet, this was only the beginning of David's journey. After the anointing, David returned to his shepherd's life, outwardly unchanged, still tending sheep in the fields, but inwardly transformed. The Spirit of the Lord was with him, equipping and preparing him for the incredible challenges that lay ahead. Meanwhile, over at King Saul's court, an eerie darkness was creeping in. As 1 Samuel 16:14 reveals, the Spirit of the Lord was departing from Saul, signaling that a new chapter was unfolding in Israel's history, with David poised at its center. At the 23rd chapter, we learn that the Spirit of the Lord had left Saul, and an evil spirit began to torment him relentlessly. Concerned for their troubled king, Saul's servants proposed a remedy. They suggested finding someone skilled at playing the harp, believing that soothing music could calm Saul's disturbed spirit. It was then that David's name surfaced. One of the servants spoke of David, highlighting not only his exceptional musical talent, but also his bravery, wisdom in speech, good appearance, and, most importantly, that the Lord was with him. Responding to this, David was summoned to Saul's court. The young shepherd, who had spent his recent days tending sheep in the fields of Bethlehem, suddenly found himself in the royal palace, playing music to ease the king's torment. Saul was deeply impressed by David, and he appointed him as his armor-bearer. This moment reveals how God was carefully orchestrating events. David's musical talents, honed during countless hours in the Bethlehem fields, were now opening doors for him to learn about royal life and leadership, preparing him for the monumental role ahead. But the defining moment of David's youth was still to come. In 1 Samuel 17, we encounter the legendary confrontation between David and Goliath. The Israelite army was waging war against the Philistines, and Goliath, a towering Philistine champion, openly challenged the Israelites every day to send a warrior to face him in single combat. Towering approximately 3 meters tall, Goliath wore armor weighing over 50 kilograms, and the tip of his spear was as large as a weaver's beam. For 40 days, he mocked the Israelite army, daring anyone to challenge him. Meanwhile, David, who had briefly returned home to tend his father's sheep, was sent to the battlefield to deliver supplies to his older brothers. Upon arriving, he heard Goliath's defiant challenge and felt a surge of indignation. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine," David asked, "that he should defy the armies of the living God?" David's courage did not emerge suddenly, but was forged in the fields of Bethlehem, where he had previously faced lions and bears to protect his flock. When questioned about his ability to confront Goliath, David declared confidently, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Armed only with his sling, 5 smooth stones from the brook, and an unshakable faith in God, David stepped forward to face Goliath. The contrast was striking. A young shepherd pitted against a battle-hardened warrior, a simple sling against a sword, and faith standing against sheer brute strength. When Goliath saw David, he sneered at him for his youth. "Am I a dog," he mocked, "that you come at me with sticks?" But David's response was resolute and powerful, words that would resonate through the ages. "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." With a single stone launched from his sling, David struck Goliath on the forehead, causing the giant to fall instantaneously. The impossible had occurred. A shepherd had defeated a warrior. Faith had triumphed over fear. David's victory over Goliath was not merely a military win. It was a profound demonstration of divine power and courage. This powerful testimony reveals the extraordinary strength that flows from unwavering faith in God. It showed both Israel and the entire world that the Lord perceives things in a profoundly different way than humans do. While people often judge by outward appearances, God looks deep into the heart. This event marked the true beginning of David's ascent, from a humble, obscure shepherd in Bethlehem to a national hero almost overnight. Women sang joyous songs in the streets celebrating his triumph. The famous saying captures it perfectly: "Saul struck down his thousands, but David his tens of thousands." David's youth, from his secret anointing by Samuel to his public victory over the giant Goliath, laid a solid foundation for everything that was to follow in his life. His story teaches us invaluable lessons about the importance of preparation, courage, and placing our trust in God. David didn't become a great leader instantaneously. Every experience in his early years, tending sheep in the fields, playing music for King Saul, and bravely confronting Goliath, served as essential building blocks in the construction of his character and leadership. He confronted his own personal giants long before stepping onto the battlefield. The narrative of David's youth is a profound reminder that God often works quietly and behind the scenes, shaping us for purposes far greater than we could possibly imagine. During moments when we feel unnoticed, forgotten, or underestimated, God might be using that time to mold our character and develop the vital skills required for our future calling. David's heroic courage facing Goliath challenges each of us to confront the giants in our own lives, whether those giants be fears, insecurities, or seemingly insurmountable challenges. His story boldly assures us that with God's help, no obstacle is too great to overcome. Furthermore, David's youth teaches the significance of faithfulness in small things. Before he led armies into battle, he carefully cared for sheep. Before performing before crowds, he practiced diligently even in solitude. His commitment to these seemingly insignificant tasks prepared him thoroughly for the tremendous responsibilities he would later shoulder. As we continue to explore David's story, we will see how these formative years profoundly shaped the man he would become. His experiences as a shepherd, musician, and young warrior laid the essential groundwork for his reign as the greatest king in Israel's history. Yet, the path ahead was not without hardship. David would face intense challenges, persecution, and temptation that would test his faith and character to their utmost limits. David's stunning victory over Goliath ushered in a new chapter of his life. The once obscure shepherd was now a celebrated war hero known throughout Israel. While the people rejoiced, an extraordinary friendship began to blossom within King Saul's court. Jonathan, Saul's son and heir to the throne, was deeply impressed by David. The Bible offers a beautiful depiction of this friendship in 1 Samuel 18:1. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David and loved him as himself. This was not a shallow or fleeting relationship. It was a profound bond rooted in mutual respect, admiration, and genuine affection. The depth of their friendship is powerfully illustrated through Jonathan's remarkable actions in 1 Samuel 18:4. In a symbolic and significant gesture, Jonathan removed the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic, sword, bow, and belt. This was far more than just gifts exchanged between friends. In their culture, it symbolized something deeply meaningful, a public acknowledgement of David's worth and Jonathan's own commitment to him. Wow! During this period, Jonathan, the rightful heir to the throne, essentially acknowledged David's claim by stepping aside. Their blossoming friendship brought David favor not only with Jonathan but also with King Saul and the people. In 1 Samuel 18:5, we see the remarkable success of David's missions for Saul. Whatever assignment he was given, he completed with such excellence that Saul promoted him to a high military rank. This advancement pleased both the troops and Saul's officers alike. David proved himself not only brave on the battlefield, but also wise and skillful as a leader. Yet, David's growing success soon sparked trouble. Following a significant military victory, the women of Israel came out to celebrate with singing. Their song went, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." 1 Samuel 18:7. While the song honored both Saul and David, it ignited jealousy in King Saul's heart. Saul's anger is vividly described in 1 Samuel 18:9. He was very upset by the refrain that praised David's greater achievements. "They have credited David with tens of thousands," Saul thought bitterly, "but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom?" From this moment on, Saul watched David closely, his jealousy quickly turning hostile. The very next day, as recorded in 1 Samuel 18:10-11, an evil spirit from God came powerfully upon Saul. While Saul was prophesying wildly in his house, David was playing the lyre, as he often did. Saul picked up a spear, intending to pin David to the wall, but David evaded Saul's attack twice. This event, marked the beginning of Saul's long series of attempts to kill David. Despite the king's growing enmity, David continued to thrive. According to 1 Samuel 18:14-16, David was successful in all his endeavors because the Lord was with him. Observing David's rising popularity and victories, Saul grew fearful, while all Israel and Judah loved David for leading them in their military campaigns. Unable to kill David outright, Saul resorted to more subtle schemes, even involving his own family. One such plot revolved around his daughter Michal. As 1 Samuel 18:20-21 tells us, Michal loved David, and when Saul heard of this, he was pleased because he planned to trap David through marriage. Saul offered Michal to David with a dangerous condition. David had to bring back a dowry of 100 Philistine foreskins, essentially a death sentence. However, David not only met the challenge, but doubled it, returning with 200 foreskins. Forced to honor his word, Saul gave Michal to David in marriage. Yet, this marriage did not secure David's safety. Saul's hostility only grew worse. In 1 Samuel 19:1, Saul orders his son Jonathan and all his officials to kill David. But Jonathan, deeply devoted to David, could not accept this command and remained his protective friend and ally. Let's take a closer look at the deep friendship between David and Jonathan and how it played a critical role in David's survival. Jonathan, willing to risk his own standing, courageously intervened on behalf of David with his father, King Saul. In 1 Samuel 19:4-5, Jonathan passionately pleads, "Don't let the king do wrong to his servant David, for he has not wronged you. In fact, everything he has done has been for your benefit. Remember when he bravely faced the Philistine? The Lord brought a great victory to all Israel through him, and you were glad then. So why would you now do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him without reason?" Jonathan's heartfelt appeal temporarily softened Saul's heart, and he swore, "As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death." 1 Samuel 19:6. However, this fragile peace was short-lived. The evil spirit that tormented Saul soon returned, driving him once more to attempt to kill David with a spear. Though David narrowly escaped this deadly attack, it became painfully clear that he could no longer feel safe within Saul's court. At this critical juncture, Michal, David's wife, took on a vital role in protecting him. As recorded in 1 Samuel 19:11-12, Saul sent men to keep watch over David's house, with orders to kill him the next morning. But Michal warned David urgently, "If you don't run for your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed." Helping him escape, she let David down through a window under cover of night, allowing him to flee unseen. Thus began David's period of exile, a drastic fall from grace. Once Israel's hero and the king's favored warrior, David was now forced to live as a fugitive in his own land. Seeking safety and support, David first sought out Ahimelech, the priest at Nob. Not wanting to reveal the truth of his perilous situation, David claimed he was on a secret mission for King Saul. Trusting him, Ahimelech provided David with consecrated bread and the sword of Goliath. While this act seemed minor, it later precipitated tragic consequences. Doeg the Edomite, one of Saul's servants present at Nob, reported the incident to Saul, which led to the brutal execution of Ahimelech and many other priests there. Fleeing further, David sought refuge among the Philistines in Gath. To avoid recognition as Israel's famed warrior, he feigned madness, a desperate tactic to save himself. Afterwards, he retreated to the cave of Adullam, which became a gathering place for those who were distressed, in debt, or discontented. 1 Samuel 22:2. His band of followers grew there, as David began his life on the run. Meanwhile, Saul's obsession with destroying David only deepened, leading to ruthless cruelty. Among his horrific acts was the massacre of the priests at Nob, who had unwittingly aided David. During his exile, David had two significant chances to kill Saul, but chose mercy instead. The first moment came in the cave of En-Gedi, where Saul entered alone to relieve himself, unaware that David and his men were hiding nearby. In a poignant scene described in 1 Samuel 24:4-6, David's men urged him, saying, "This is the day the Lord promised when he said, 'I will give your enemy into your hands. Now is your chance to deal with him as you wish.'" Quietly, David crept up and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. But rather than feeling triumphant, David was deeply convicted and troubled by having harmed Saul's garment. Reflecting his inner conflict, he said, David's reverence for God's appointed king was unwavering, even when faced with personal danger. On one notable occasion, when his men urged him to act against Saul, David steadfastly refused, declaring, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord." This respect for divine authority was further exemplified during a second critical moment. Under the cover of darkness, David infiltrated Saul's camp and found the king asleep once again. Yet David refrained from harm, saying in 1 Samuel 26:9-11, "Don't kill him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives, the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come, or he will perish in battle. But the Lord forbids me from laying a hand on the Lord's anointed." These actions underscore David's profound respect for God's established authority, even when Saul wielded his power unjustly against him. David understood that, despite Saul's shortcomings, he remained God's anointed king, and it was not David's place to seize the throne by force. Saul's relentless pursuit of David spanned years, turning David into a fugitive within his own land, seeking refuge even among Israel's enemies. During this harrowing period, David composed many psalms that resonate to this day, expressions of his unwavering trust in God and steadfast determination to remain faithful. This time of flight and exile was transformative for David. Removed from royal comforts and military triumphs, he learned to rely on God amid severe trials and honed his leadership skills by gathering and leading a diverse band of followers. These experiences were instrumental in preparing him for his eventual kingship over Israel. The tragic end of Saul came on the battlefield against the Philistines, where, confronted with defeat, he chose to take his own life rather than face capture. When David received this news, his immediate response was not one of celebration but of sorrow. In 2 Samuel 1:19-24, David's heartfelt lament echoes through time. "Your glory, Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen." Saul and Jonathan, loved and admired in life, were not separated in death. They were swifter than eagles, stronger than lions. Daughters of Israel, weep for Saul, who dressed you in scarlet and adorned your garments with gold ornaments. This lament reveals David's nobility and capacity for grace. Even after enduring years of persecution, he honored Saul's memory and acknowledged his virtues. Furthermore, David's mournful tribute to Jonathan underscores the profound depth of their friendship. David's journey, from a trusted companion of the king to a hunted adversary, was marked by hardship and growth. Through these trials, his character was tempered and fortified. He absorbed vital lessons in humility, patience, and faith in God, which would prove essential in his role as Israel's future king. The saga of David and Saul offers enduring insights into leadership, jealousy, friendship, and unwavering faith. It reveals how envy can corrupt even those initially chosen by God, and how integrity and steadfast faith can sustain a person through the darkest tribulations. As David readied himself to ascend the throne, these lessons would guide his reign and legacy. Years earlier, God had made a promise to David, one that stayed with him through the trials and persecution he endured. These hard-earned lessons would deeply influence not only his reign, but also his unique relationship with God in the years ahead. The tragic news of Saul and Jonathan's deaths came to David via a young Amalekite messenger. Eager for a reward, the messenger claimed he had delivered the final blow to Saul at the king's own request. But David's response was nothing like what the messenger expected. In 2 Samuel 1:14-16, David asks, "Why weren't you afraid to lift your hand against the Lord's anointed?" Then he orders one of his soldiers, "Go, kill him." The soldier strikes the messenger down, and he dies. David's words are pointed. "You are responsible for your own death, for your own lips testified against you when you said, 'I killed the Lord's anointed.'" This act demonstrates David's profound respect for God's chosen authority, even when that authority had been hostile toward him, and sends a clear message. After mourning Saul and Jonathan, David sought God's guidance for his next move. In 2 Samuel 2:1 it says, "In the course of time, David inquired of the Lord, 'Shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah?' The Lord answered, 'Go up.' David then asked, 'Where shall I go?' 'To Hebron,' the Lord replied. This moment highlights a key feature of David's leadership, his devotion to consulting God before acting, a stark contrast to Saul's tendency to act on his own. Upon arriving in Hebron, David was anointed king over the tribe of Judah. As recorded in 2 Samuel 2:4, then the men of Judah came to Hebron, and there anointed David king over the tribe of Judah. This marked the first major step toward the fulfillment of God's earlier promise to David, made when Samuel had secretly anointed him years before. However, David's rise to become king over all Israel would be neither swift nor easy. Meanwhile, Abner, commander of Saul's army, had declared Ishbosheth, Saul's son, as king over the northern tribes of Israel. This set the stage for a bitter civil war between the house of Saul and the house of David. 2 Samuel 3:1 summarizes this conflict. The war between the house of Saul and the house of David lasted a long time. David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. While this verse captures the overall arc of the conflict, the detailed history is fraught with tragedy and complexity. One pivotal event was the death of Abner. After a falling out with Ishbosheth, Abner decided to switch his loyalty to David. David welcomed him warmly and sent him off in peace. But Joab, David's military commander, viewed Abner as a threat. In a ruthless act of revenge for his brother's murder, Joab assassinated Abner. David's response to this brutal act reveals his character. In 2 Samuel 3:28-29, David declares, "When I heard about it, I said, 'I and my kingdom are innocent before the Lord forever concerning the blood of Abner. May his blood fall upon the head of Joab and his family.'" David's pronouncement underscores his commitment to innocence and justice, distancing himself from the crime and placing responsibility squarely on Joab and his family. The blame for the turmoil fell squarely on Joab and his family. David pronounced a severe curse upon them, saying, "May no one from Job's household ever be free from affliction, whether it be a persistent sore leprosy, a reliance on a crutch, a violent death by the sword, or hunger." This powerful declaration highlighted David's unwavering dedication to justice and his firm refusal to tolerate needless violence, even when it came from his own men. The bitter civil war finally ended with the assassination of Ishbosheth, who was slain by two of his own captains. Hoping to earn a reward from David, his captains brought Ishbosheth's head to Hebron. Yet David's response was unexpected and revealing of his character. As recorded in 2 Samuel 4:9-12, David said, "As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me from all trouble, when someone brought me word that Saul was dead, I had him executed because he was boasting in his message, thinking to bring good news. So how much more should I now demand the blood of those wicked men who killed in his own house?" David then ordered his men to kill the 2 captains. They were executed. Their hands and feet were cut off, and their bodies were hung by the pool in Hebron. Meanwhile, Ishbosheth's head was respectfully taken and buried in Abner's tomb at Hebron. With the death of Ishbosheth, the path was clear for David to unify Israel under his rule. In 2 Samuel 5:1-3, a pivotal moment unfolds. All the tribes of Israel gathered at Hebron and declared, "We are your own flesh and blood. When Saul was king over us, you led Israel in all their military campaigns. The Lord said to you, 'You will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler.'" The elders of Israel came to David. This anointing at Hebron signified the fulfillment of God's promise to David years before. The shepherd, who had been a humble court musician and a fugitive warrior, was now the rightful king of a united Israel. One of David's very first actions as the king of a unified Israel was the bold conquest of Jerusalem. According to 2 Samuel 5:6-7, David and his men marched on the city to confront the Jebusites who lived there. The Jebusites taunted David, saying, "You will not enter here. Even the blind and the lame can keep you out." But David was undeterred. He succeeded in capturing the fortress of Zion, what became known as the City of David. Strategically, choosing Jerusalem as his capital was brilliant. Sitting on the border between the northern and southern tribal lands, Jerusalem was perfectly positioned as a unifying center for the entire nation. Furthermore, because it was not originally claimed by any one tribe, Jerusalem became a truly national city in both symbolism and function. With Jerusalem established as his capital, David soon faced external threats, particularly from the Philistines. In 2 Samuel 5:17-21, we see how David responded to this danger. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they prepared to challenge his authority, setting the stage for further conflict that David was ready to confront. The Philistines launched a full-scale search for David, but word of this reached him, and he moved swiftly to the stronghold. Meanwhile, the Philistines had spread out across the valley of Rephaim. Seeking guidance, David inquired, "O Lord, should I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands?" The Lord answered him clearly, "Go ahead, for I will certainly deliver the Philistines into your hands." Encouraged by this divine assurance, David attacked at Baal-perazim and achieved a decisive victory. Reflecting on this triumph, David said, "As waters break out, the Lord has burst through against my enemies before me." This is why the place came to be called Baal-perazim. Interestingly, during the battle, the Philistines abandoned their idols, which David and his men seized for themselves. This victory held great significance, not just on the battlefield, but spiritually as well. Capturing and destroying the Philistine idols symbolized the supreme power of Israel's God over the gods of neighboring nations. With the nation unified and the capital established, David then focused intently on religious concerns. One of his top priorities was to bring the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. The Ark, representing God's presence among his people, had been absent from central national life for many years. However, David's first attempt to bring the Ark to Jerusalem ended in tragedy. As recorded in 2 Samuel 6-7, when they reached the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out to steady the ark as the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger flared against Uzzah for this irreverent act, and God struck him down, and he died beside the ark. This painful incident taught David and all Israel a sobering lesson about God's holiness and the urgent need to follow his instructions precisely. The ark remained in the house of Obed-Edom for 3 months before David made a second attempt. This time, the ark was carried exactly as God commanded, by the Levites. The ark's entrance into Jerusalem was a moment of immense celebration. 2 Samuel 6:14-15 describes David wearing a linen ephod, dancing before the Lord with all his might. Alongside all Israel, they brought up the ark with loud shouts and the sound of trumpets. David's spirited dance was an act of wholehearted worship and total surrender to God. Yet not everyone shared David's joy. Michal, Saul's daughter and David's wife, despised him for his exuberant behavior. David's response, found in 2 Samuel 6:21-22, reveals the depth of his heart. "It was before the Lord, who chose me instead of your father, or anyone from his house, that I now celebrate. As the Lord's chosen ruler over Israel, I will celebrate before the Lord. In fact, I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humbled in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you mentioned, I will be honored." With the ark now established in Jerusalem, David longed to build a permanent temple to house it. However, God had a different plan. Through the prophet Nathan, God spoke to David, as recorded in 2 Samuel 7:5-7, saying, "Go and tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. God, you are the one who wants to build a house for me, a dwelling place. Since the day I led the Israelites out of Egypt, I have never lived in a house. Instead, I've moved from place to place, living in a tent wherever I journeyed with all the Israelites. Did I ever tell any of their leaders whom I appointed to shepherd my people Israel, 'Why haven't you built me a house made of cedar?'" Though God refused David's initial request to construct a temple, he made an extraordinary promise to him, one that would echo through generations. In 2 Samuel 7:11-16, God declares, "The Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over, and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood. I will establish his kingdom, and he is the one who will build a house for my name. I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will discipline him with a rod wielded by men, with floggings inflicted by human hands. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever." This promise, known as the Davidic Covenant, is one of the most significant moments in Israel's history. God promised David an eternal dynasty, a vow ultimately fulfilled through Jesus Christ, the son of David par excellence. David's response to this breathtaking promise is a heartfelt prayer filled with gratitude and humility. In 2 Samuel 7:18-19 we read, "Then King David went in and sat before the Lord and said, 'Who am I, sovereign Lord, and what is my family, that you have brought me this far? And as if that were not enough, in your sight, sovereign Lord, you have also spoken about the future of the house of your servant. Is this your usual way of dealing with mankind, sovereign Lord?'" David's rise to the throne marked a new chapter for Israel. Under his leadership, Israel grew into a regional power, expanding its borders and forming alliances with neighboring nations. But more than that, David established Jerusalem as not only the political capital, but also the spiritual heart of the nation. His reign was far from perfect and would later face many personal challenges and failures, as the next chapters will reveal. Yet, the foundation David laid during these early years, as a united nation with a firm capital and, most importantly, a renewed devotion to God, would shape the fate of Israel for generations to come. David's journey from humble beginnings in Bethlehem to the throne in Jerusalem is a vivid testament to God's sovereignty and his plan for his people. Each step, from shepherd boy to court musician, from fugitive warrior to king, shows David's unwavering trust in God and a steadfast commitment to God's will. David's ascent wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a pivotal moment in Israel's history. Through his leadership, the nation entered a new era of strength, purpose, and divine promise. David's reign marked a time of renewed unity and a powerful sense of divine purpose. Choosing Jerusalem as his capital and establishing the Ark of the Covenant, there set the stage for what would become the focal point of Jewish worship for centuries to come. Central to his rule was the Davidic Covenant, the divine promise of an eternal dynasty that extended beyond David's immediate kingdom to a future Messiah. This promise would deeply shape Israel's hope and faith, ultimately finding its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. David's journey to kingship offers us profound lessons about patience, perseverance, and trusting in God's perfect timing. Despite facing years of persecution and exile, David never attempted to forcefully claim the throne. Instead, he respected the authority God had established, even when it acted unjustly toward him. We witness in David not a flawless leader, but one who readily learned from his mistakes and earnestly sought God's guidance. His reaction to the tragic death of Uzzah and the cautious way he approached bringing the ark to Jerusalem afterward reveal a heart committed to submitting to God's will, even when that meant acknowledging errors and making corrections. As David solidified his position as king over all Israel, new challenges emerged. His reign would be celebrated for remarkable military victories and expansion of territory, yet it was also marked by personal weaknesses and painful family struggles. Still, the foundation laid in those early years, a deep dependence on God, a steadfast commitment to justice, and a heart devoted to worship, would continue to define both his reign and his lasting legacy. David's ascent to the throne transcends a mere tale of personal triumph. It stands as a testament to the transformative power of God working through one individual and an entire nation. His story continues to inspire and instruct us, reminding us that God often chooses unlikely people to fulfill his purposes, and that true greatness is found in humble submission to divine will. With a unified kingdom in Jerusalem, established as the political and spiritual capital, David focused on strengthening and expanding Israel's borders. He launched a series of successful military campaigns, chronicled in 2 Samuel 8-6, that brought numerous victories. For example, he defeated the Moabites, forcing them to lie on the ground to be measured. 1 out of every 3 was killed, while the rest were spared, and they became subject to David, bringing him tribute. David also conquered Hadadezer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah, during Hadadezer's effort to maintain his monument along the Euphrates River. David seized 1,000 of Hadadezer's chariots, 7,000 cavalry, and 20,000 foot soldiers, but he hamstrung all but 100 of the chariot horses. When the Arameans of Damascus came to assist Hadadezer, David defeated 22,000 of them, established garrisons within the Aramean kingdom, and rendered the Arameans subject to him as they paid tribute. Throughout these campaigns, the Lord granted David victory wherever he went. These triumphs not only expanded Israel's borders significantly, but also brought considerable wealth and prestige to the kingdom, solidifying David's position as a powerful and divinely favored ruler. King David showed his deep gratitude to God throughout his reign by dedicating much of his war spoils to the Lord in acknowledgment of the victories he achieved. His reign was distinguished not only by military triumphs, but also by acts of justice and compassion. For example, in 2 Samuel 9:1, David asks, "Is there anyone left from the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" This question leads to David's encounter with Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, to whom he extends great kindness, faithfully honoring his promise to Jonathan. However, despite his power and success, David's reign was marred by a grave sin with lasting consequences. The story unfolds in 2 Samuel 11:2, during springtime, when kings typically went out to war. David, however, remained in Jerusalem instead of joining his army. He sent Joab with the king's men and the whole Israelite army to attack the Ammonites and lay siege to Rabbah. One evening, David rose from his bed to walk on the roof of his palace, where he noticed a woman bathing. This woman was Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite, one of David's elite soldiers. Rather than turning away, David summoned her and committed adultery. When Bathsheba later informed David that she was pregnant, he attempted to conceal his wrongdoing. First, David recalled Uriah from the battlefield, hoping Uriah would sleep with his wife so that the child would be presumed his. Yet Uriah demonstrated remarkable integrity, refusing to enjoy the comforts of home while his fellow soldiers remained at war. In 2 Samuel 11:11, Uriah says to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my lord Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country." Seeing that his plan failed, David made a darker choice. He sent Uriah back to battle with instructions for Joab to position Uriah at the front lines of the fiercest fighting, and then withdraw support, ensuring Uriah's death. After Uriah died, David took Bathsheba as his wife. Perhaps David believed his sin would remain hidden, but nothing escapes God's watchful eyes. In 2 Samuel 12:1, the Lord sent the prophet Nathan to confront David. Nathan told David a parable about a rich man who stole and killed the only sheep belonging to a poor man. David was outraged by the injustice and declared that the man deserved to die. Then Nathan revealed, "You are that man." Nathan's confrontation led David to repentance. In 2 Samuel 12:13, David confesses, "I have sinned against the Lord." Though God forgave David, the consequences of his sin were severe. Nathan prophesied that the sword would never leave David's family and that the child born from David's union with Bathsheba would die. Indeed, the child became ill, and despite David's earnest prayers, he died after 7 days. David's response to this tragic loss is remarkable. In 2 Samuel 12:20 it says, "Then David got up from the ground, washed himself, put on lotions, and changed his clothes. He went into the house of the Lord and worshipped." When questioned about his behavior, David's actions reflected a profound acceptance and faith amidst his grief. David showed profound trust in God's sovereignty, expressing in 2 Samuel 12:23, "But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me." However, the repercussions of David's sin continued to unfold over the subsequent years. One of the most painful prophecies Nathan made came true when Amnon, David's son, committed the terrible act of raping his half-sister Tamar. This heinous crime ignited a vicious cycle of revenge and rebellion, ultimately leading to Absalom's revolt. Absalom, another son of David, led a rebellion so severe that it forced David to flee Jerusalem. This event eerily mirrored David's earlier escape from Saul. In 2 Samuel 15:30, a powerful image emerges. David walking up the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was shrouded, and he was barefoot, symbolizing deep sorrow. Those accompanying him also covered their heads and wept on their way up the mountain. Throughout this ordeal, despite facing insults and shame, David responded not with anger, but with humility and unwavering trust in God. When Shimei, a man from Saul's lineage, cursed him, David's reply in 2 Samuel 16:12 was measured and reflective. "Leave him alone, let him curse me, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore to me his covenant blessing instead of his curse." Absalom's rebellion eventually ended with his death, despite David's clear command to spare his son's life. David's lament over Absalom, recorded in 2 Samuel 18:33, stands as one of the Bible's most poignant moments. The king was deeply shaken. He ascended the upper chamber by the gateway and wept as he went. His words conveyed unbearable grief. "O my son, Absalom, my son, Absalom! If only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom." Despite these personal tragedies and family turmoil, David's reign remained distinguished by notable military victories and prosperity for Israel. Yet, near the end of his time as king, David made another serious mistake by ordering a census of the people without divine authorization. In 2 Samuel 24:10, after counting the fighting men, David admitted his guilt. "I have sinned greatly in what I have done. Now, Lord, I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant, for I have done a very foolish thing." This census led to a devastating plague that claimed the lives of 70,000 Israelites. The plague only ceased after David built an altar and offered sacrifices at the very site that would one day be the location of the temple. David's reign, filled with its triumphs and mistakes, powerfully illustrates the complexities of human nature and highlights the ongoing need to place trust in God. Despite his failures, David consistently returned with a repentant heart, seeking restoration. It is this quality that earns him the enduring title of a man after God's own heart. In the final years of his reign, David focused his attention on a long-cherished goal, the construction of a temple for the Lord. Although God made it clear that it would be David's son, not David himself, who would build this temple, David committed himself fully to preparing for the monumental project. His extensive preparations are detailed in 1 Chronicles 22, marking his dedication to this sacred mission. We read about King David's deep commitment to preparing for a future temple for the Lord. David expressed his concern that his son Solomon was young and inexperienced, and he wanted the house built for the Lord to be magnificent, a structure renowned with splendor and fame admired by all nations. To accomplish this vision, David took it upon himself to make extensive preparations before his death. His dedication is clear from the sheer volume of resources he gathered, as detailed in 1 Chronicles 22:14. "I have taken great pains to provide for the temple of the Lord, 100,000 talents of gold, 1,000,000 talents of silver, along with quantities of bronze and iron too great to be weighed, as well as wood. Beyond materials, David also meticulously organized the Levites and priests for their future temple duties. He established priestly shifts, arranged musicians and singers, and appointed gatekeepers to oversee the temple. These preparations revealed David's deep concern to ensure that the worship of God would proceed with reverence, dignity, and orderly devotion. As David aged, the pressing issue of succession arose. Although God had already chosen Solomon to be David's successor, there was an attempted usurpation by another son, Adonijah. This succession crisis is recorded in 1 Kings 1. When the threat emerged, David acted decisively to secure Solomon's place on the throne. 1 Kings 1:32-35 recounts David's commands. Call the priest Zadok, the prophet Nathan, and Benaiah son of Jehoiada. When they appeared before the king, David instructed them to take Solomon and have him mount David's own mule, then escort him down to the city of Gihon. There, Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet were to anoint Solomon king over Israel. David commanded, "Blow the trumpet and shout, 'Long live King Solomon!' They were to follow Solomon to the throne where he would sit and reign in David's place. David appointed Solomon as ruler over both Israel and Judah. With Solomon firmly established as heir, David turned his focus to giving his final instructions, speaking both to Solomon and the assembled people of Israel. In 1 Kings 2:1-4, David offers wise counsel to his son. "I am about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong and act like a man. Obey the Lord your God. Walk in his ways and keep his decrees, commands, laws, and regulations, as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go. This way the Lord will keep the promises he made to me. If your descendants watch how they live and walk faithfully before him with all their heart and soul, you will never lack a successor on the throne of Israel." In his last recorded words, David addresses the entire assembly of Israel with a beautiful prayer of praise and thanksgiving. Recorded in 1 Chronicles 29:13. David exclaims, "Praise! From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Yours, Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the majesty and the splendor, for everything in heaven and earth is yours. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom. You are exalted as head over all." This heartfelt declaration highlights David's humility and recognition of God's sovereign majesty as he concludes his life and reign. "And the majesty and splendor belong to you, for everything in heaven and earth is yours alone. Lord, the kingdom is yours. You are exalted as the supreme ruler over all. Wealth and honor flow from you as you reign over all creation. In your hands lie strength and power, enabling you to uplift and empower all. Now, our God, we offer you heartfelt thanks and praise, celebrating your glorious name. After a life marked by exhilarating highs and crushing lows, by resounding triumphs and searing failures, David finally found rest. As recorded in 1 Kings 2:10-11, then David rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. He reigned over Israel for 40 years, 7 years in Hebron and 33 in Jerusalem. Yet David's legacy extends far beyond his earthly life. His influence on Israel's history and faith is vast and enduring, visible in several key areas. Firstly, David remains the archetype of the ideal king in Israel. Even centuries after his passing, later kings were often measured against the standard he set. To be a king like David became synonymous with being just and God-fearing. Secondly, David left behind a rich literary heritage through the Psalms. Many of these sacred songs and prayers are attributed to him, continuing to provide comfort, inspiration, and guidance to believers around the world. His psalms capture the full spectrum of human emotion, from joyous celebration to deep sorrow, from steadfast trust to moments of despair, all framed by an unyielding faith in God. Thirdly, and perhaps most significantly, David occupies a central place in Israel's messianic expectations. God's covenant with David promised an eternal dynasty, fueling the hope for a descendant who would establish an everlasting kingdom. This profound hope found its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. The New Testament begins in Matthew 1:1 with the words, "This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham." Jesus is frequently called the son of David throughout the Gospels, his lineage viewed as the realization of these messianic prophecies. David's complex life offers timeless lessons that reach beyond his historical context. His story teaches us about God's sovereignty in history. God chose David, the youngest son of Jesse, to be Israel's greatest king, showing us that God often works through the unlikely and underestimated to achieve his purposes. David's journey also highlights the critical importance of faith and trust in God. From his fearless confrontation with Goliath, through his years as a fugitive, to his reign as king, David placed unwavering confidence in God, even when faced with seemingly impossible odds. At the same time, David's story doesn't hide the reality of sin and its consequences, even for heroes of faith. His adultery with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband Uriah had profound and lasting effects. Yet, when confronted with his wrongdoing, David's genuine repentance and humble acceptance of God's judgment provide us with a powerful model for confronting our own failures. Moreover, David's life teaches us about forgiveness and restoration. Despite his grave sins, David experienced God's forgiveness and was restored, demonstrating the transformative power of God's mercy and grace. David's experience with God's forgiveness and restoration offers us profound hope. No matter how far we have fallen, forgiveness and restoration remain within reach for those who approach God with genuine repentance. This powerful truth underscores the accessibility of God's mercy to every sincere heart. Moreover, David's story elegantly teaches us that greatness in God's eyes is not about flawless perfection, but about a heart consistently turning toward him despite our imperfections. David earned the title a man after God's own heart because, despite his mistakes, his deepest intentions and desires were always aligned with God. To sum up, David's life is a rich, intricate tapestry that continues to inspire and resonate with us, even thousands of years later. From his early days as a humble shepherd to ascending the throne of Israel, through victories and defeats, moments of unwavering faith and human failings, his journey paints a vivid portrait of a dynamic relationship with God. David's legacy as a warrior king, a gifted poet, and a devoted man of faith profoundly shapes how we view leadership, worship, and what it truly means to live a life wholly dedicated to God. His story reminds us that God can and does work through imperfect people to fulfill his perfect plans. True greatness is not defined by the absence of flaws, but by a continual readiness to seek God in every circumstance life brings. May we, like David, strive to be people after God's own heart, trusting in his grace, embracing his corrective guidance, and dedicating our lives wholeheartedly to serving him.